SEAL Team 6 was surrounded by enemy fire when the A-10 Warthog pilot was wounded and the aircraft lost control. Nobody could have predicted that salvation would come from the quiet technician who repaired A-10s in the hangar. But when Kate Morrison took control of that A-10 systems, her hands held more than just mechanical expertise. They held the muscle memory of someone who had once destroyed enemy tanks within minutes of engagement. Welcome to Velvo Stories, where ordinary faces hide extraordinary pasts, and heroism speaks not in words, but actions. If you believe legends only wear uniforms, think again. Now, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? The morning had started like any other maintenance shift at Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan. The 354th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron was conducting close air support missions for ground operations throughout the region, and their A-10 Thunderbolt II aircraft required constant maintenance to keep them mission-ready in the harsh desert environment. Kate Morrison was there in her usual capacity, senior aircraft mechanic, ensuring that the Warthog's engines, weapon systems, and avionics were functioning at peak performance. To the pilots and ground crews, Kate was just another skilled technician among the maintenance personnel, someone who could diagnose complex mechanical problems, repair battle damage, and keep the A-10s flying despite the challenging operating conditions. Her green maintenance uniform marked her as essential support personnel, someone who served a critical but behind-the-scenes role in keeping America's premier close-air support aircraft operational. What they didn't know was that before Kate Morrison had spent 3 years maintaining A-10 Thunderbolts, she had been Major Kate Morrison, one of the Air Force's most accomplished A-10 pilots. For 8 years, she had flown close air support missions over Iraq and Afghanistan, earning a reputation as someone who could deliver devastating firepower with surgical precision while operating at extremely low altitudes under intense enemy fire. But that was before the mission that ended her flying career. 3 years ago, during what was supposed to be a routine close air support mission in eastern Afghanistan, Kate's A-10 had suffered catastrophic hydraulic failure while supporting a trapped Marine unit. Despite the mechanical emergency, she had managed to complete the mission, destroying enemy positions that were threatening the Marines and enabling their successful extraction. But the damage to her aircraft had been severe. During the emergency landing, her A-10 had crashed on the runway, breaking her back in 3 places and ending her flying career. The Marines she'd saved had lived. The mission had been successful, but Kate's dreams of flying had died in that twisted wreckage.
She had taken medical retirement from flight status, eventually accepting a position as a senior aircraft mechanic where she could continue serving while staying close to the aircraft she could no longer fly. For 3 years, it had worked. Maintaining A-10s was meaningful work that kept her connected to close air support missions without the physical demands and risk that her injured back could no longer handle. Until today changed everything. Kate had been conducting pre-flight inspection on an A-10 when the emergency klaxon pierced the afternoon quiet. The distinctive wail of the airfield's alarm system put every person at Bagram into immediate response mode. Through the radio chatter crackling across the maintenance frequency, she quickly understood the situation. SEAL Team 6 was pinned down during a high-value target elimination mission. They were surrounded by enemy forces and taking heavy fire from fortified positions. The team's only hope was close air support from an A-10 that was already airborne and en route to their position. But something had gone wrong. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Hog 77, came the strained voice of Captain Makana Rodriguez over the radio. "I've taken enemy fire, losing consciousness. Aircraft is uncontrolled descent." Kate dropped her inspection checklist and ran toward the flight line. She could see Rodriguez's A-10 in the distance, trailing smoke and descending at a dangerous angle. The aircraft was still several miles from the airfield, but it was clear that the pilot was incapacitated and the Warthog was in serious trouble. Tower, this is Morrison in maintenance. I have visual on Hog 77. Pilot appears unconscious, aircraft in uncontrolled descent. Morrison, stay off the emergency frequency. This is for qualified personnel only. But Kate was already moving. She commandeered a maintenance vehicle and drove toward the area where Rodriguez's A-10 was likely to crash land. Behind her, she could hear emergency vehicles responding, but she was closest to the projected impact point. Rodriguez's A-10 hit the desert floor hard, bounced twice, and skidded to a stop with smoke pouring from its engines. Kate reached the aircraft just as emergency crews were deploying, but she didn't wait for permission. She climbed up the aircraft's ladder and into the cockpit. Captain Rodriguez was unconscious, blood trickling from a head wound where enemy fire had apparently struck her helmet. Her breathing was shallow but steady, alive, but clearly unable to continue the mission. Through the A-10's radio, Kate could hear the desperate calls from SEAL Team 6. Any aircraft, this is Neptune 6. We are surrounded and taking heavy fire. Request immediate close air support.
Multiple enemy armor and fortified positions. We have wounded and cannot extract without air support. Kate looked at the A-10's instrument panel, the same layout she had mastered during 8 years as a pilot, though updated with newer avionics. The aircraft had taken damage, but appeared flyable. Most importantly, its GAU-8 Avenger 30mm cannon and remaining Maverick missiles were intact. This is Morrison, she transmitted on the emergency frequency. I can complete the close air support mission. Morrison, negative. Your maintenance personnel. Return to base immediately. But Kate was already beginning the process of extracting Captain Rodriguez from the pilot's seat. Command, SEAL Team 6 needs immediate air support. I'm the only pilot available to provide it. Morrison, you're not a pilot, you're a mechanic. Kate secured Rodriguez in the back of an arriving medical vehicle, then climbed back into the A-10's cockpit. Command, Major Kate Morrison, 8 years A-10 pilot, 847th Fighter Squadron. Medically retired from flight status, but still current on A-10 systems. Those SEALs are going to die without air support. There was a long pause on the radio. Then, Major Morrison, you're not cleared for flight operations. Your medical status. My medical status doesn't matter if those SEALs don't make it home, Kate interrupted, already beginning the A-10 startup sequence. I'm taking this bird up. Kate's hands found the A-10's controls with muscle memory that 3 years of ground duty hadn't erased. The startup checklist, the engine ignition sequence, the weapon systems initialization, it all came back to her as if she'd flown yesterday instead of 3 years ago. But more than technical knowledge, she remembered the most important lesson of A-10 flying. Sometimes you have to fly lower and hit harder than anyone thinks is possible to save the lives of people on the ground. The A-10 lifted off from the improvised landing site, its twin engines providing the power Kate needed to reach SEAL Team 6's position within minutes. As she flew toward the coordinates, she could hear the increasingly desperate radio traffic from Neptune 6. Any air support, this is Neptune 6. We have multiple KIA, running low on ammunition. Enemy armor is advancing on our position. Kate checked her weapon systems. The GAU-8 cannon was loaded with 1,350 rounds of depleted uranium ammunition, enough firepower to destroy any armored vehicle on the battlefield. She also had 2 AGM-65 Maverick missiles remaining, perfect for eliminating fortified positions. Neptune 6, this is Hog 77. I'm 2 minutes out from your position. Mark your location with strobes and give me targets. Hog 77, thought your pilot was down. Different pilot, same aircraft. Mark your targets and keep your heads down.
Kate arrived at the battlefield to find a situation that would have challenged even the most experienced A-10 pilot. SEAL Team 6 was trapped in a small compound surrounded by enemy forces that included T-72 tanks, BTR armored personnel carriers, and multiple fortified machine gun positions. The enemy had the SEALs completely surrounded and was systematically destroying their defensive positions. Neptune 6, I count 4 tanks and 6 APCs surrounding your position, plus multiple infantry fighting positions. I'm gonna need multiple attack runs to clear them all. Hog 77, be advised, enemy has SA-7 surface-to-air missiles and extensive AAA coverage. Altitude restrictions recommend no lower than 8,000 feet. Kate looked at the battlefield below. At 8,000 feet, her cannon would be inaccurate, and the Maverick missiles might not have clear targeting solutions with the SEALs so close to enemy positions. To effectively support the trapped team, she'd need to fly much lower, dangerously lower. Neptune 6, I'm coming in at 500 feet for maximum accuracy. When I start my gun run, mark your exact position with IR strobes. Hawk 77, that's extremely low altitude. Enemy AAA will... I know the risks, Kate interrupted, already beginning her descent toward the target area. What she didn't tell them was that flying at 500 feet with an injured back after 3 years out of the cockpit in an aircraft that had already taken battle damage was probably suicidal. But SEAL Team 6 needed precision close air support, and precision required getting close to the target. Kate rolled into her first attack run, the A-10 Thunderbolt screaming toward the enemy positions at nearly 400 knots and only 500 feet above ground level. Enemy anti-aircraft fire immediately began tracking her aircraft, tracers, small arms fire, and the distinctive puffs of surface-to-air missiles trying to lock onto her heat signature. But the A-10 Thunderbolt was built for exactly this kind of mission. Its heavily armored cockpit, redundant flight systems, and powerful engines were designed to survive in the most hostile air defense environments while delivering devastating close air support. Kate lined up her first target, a T-72 tank that was firing directly into the SEAL compound. She activated the GAU-8 cannon, and the massive 30mm gun began its distinctive roar, firing depleted uranium rounds at 3,900 rounds per minute. The tank disappeared in a series of explosions as the cannon rounds tore through its armor. Target destroyed, Kate called, already maneuvering for her second attack run. 1 tank down, 3 to go. Enemy fire intensified as Kate rolled in on the second tank. A surface-to-air missile exploded close enough to rattle her aircraft, and small arms fire peppered the A-10's armored fuselage.
But she held her attack course until the GAU-8 found its target. The second tank erupted in flames. 2 tanks destroyed. Neptune 6, how's your situation? Enemy pressure is decreasing. You're doing great, Hog 77. Keep it coming. Kate's third attack run targeted the BTR armored personnel carriers that were providing fire support for enemy infantry. She came in even lower this time, barely 200 feet above ground level to ensure maximum accuracy with her cannon. The A-10 shuddered as enemy fire struck its armored sections, but the aircraft's legendary toughness kept it flying. The GAU-8 cannon tore through 2 BTRs in a single pass, leaving them burning wrecks. Kate pulled up hard, feeling the G-forces strain against her injured back, but adrenaline and determination kept her focused on the mission. Multiple armored targets destroyed, she reported. Neptune 6, what's your status on enemy infantry? Enemy infantry is pulling back, but we still have fortified positions on the ridgeline that are keeping us pinned down. Need those eliminated before we can extract. Kate looked at the ridgeline positions. They were too close to the SEAL team's location for cannon fire, but perfect targets for precision-guided Maverick missiles. She armed her remaining AGM-65s and began her targeting sequence. Neptune 6, I'm going to use missiles on the ridgeline positions. Stay low until I give you the all-clear. The first Maverick missile streaked toward its target with deadly accuracy, eliminating a fortified machine gun position that had been pouring fire into the compound.
The second missile destroyed an enemy command post, finally breaking the coordinated attack on the trapped team. "All targets destroyed," she announced. "Neptune 6, you are clear for extraction." "Hog 77, outstanding work. You just saved 6 American lives. Request you provide overwatch while we extract to LZ." Kate remained on station, circling the battlefield at low altitude while SEAL Team 6 moved to their extraction point. Her back was screaming from the G-forces and combat maneuvering. Her hands were shaking from adrenaline, and her aircraft had taken significant battle damage. But she maintained overwatch until she saw the extraction helicopters safely lift off with the SEAL team aboard. "Neptune 6 extracted safely," she finally reported. "Hog 77 returning to base." As Kate flew back toward Bagram, she realized something had changed. For 3 years, she'd convinced herself that her flying career was over, that her injured back and medical retirement meant she could never again be the pilot she had once been. But today had proven that some things, skills, instincts, the ability to deliver when lives depended on it, never really leave a pilot. Kate landed the damaged A-10 at Bagram to find half the base waiting for her. As she shut down the engines and climbed out of the cockpit, she was immediately surrounded by medical personnel, intelligence officers, and senior commanders who wanted to understand how a maintenance technician had just completed one of the most successful close air support missions in recent memory. "Major Morrison," said Colonel James Patterson, the squadron commander, "we need to talk." Kate looked at him, then at the A-10 that had carried her back into combat one more time. "Yes, sir. I suppose we do." The debriefing lasted 3 hours. Kate explained her background, her medical retirement, and the circumstances that had led her to take command of Captain Rodriguez's aircraft. The intelligence officers were particularly interested in her tactics, flying at extremely low altitude to achieve maximum accuracy while surviving heavy enemy fire. "Major Morrison," said Colonel Patterson, "what you did today was either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless. I'm not sure which." Kate looked at the gun camera footage from her mission. The destroyed tanks, the eliminated fortified positions, the successful extraction of SEAL Team 6. "Sir, 6 Americans went home to their families today. That's the only metric that matters. But you violated multiple regulations. You're not cleared for flight operations, you took an aircraft without authorization, and you engaged in combat while on medical retirement." "Yes, sir, I did." Patterson studied her for a long moment. "Major Morrison, I'm not going to court-martial you. What you did saved American lives. But I am going to ask you a question. Why are you maintaining aircraft when you should be flying them?" Kate was quiet for a moment. "Because 3 years ago, I thought my flying career was over, that my back injury meant I could never again be trusted with an A-10 and the lives of people on the ground. And now? Now I'm wondering if medical retirement was about fear rather than physical limitations." Colonel Patterson leaned back in his chair. "Major Morrison, I'm going to make you an offer. The Air Force is developing a new program for experienced pilots who want to return to limited flight status. It's designed for people exactly like you, highly experienced aviators who left active flying due to medical issues but might be able to return to certain types of missions." Kate felt her heart racing. What kind of missions? Training, evaluation, and yes, emergency response situations where your experience could save lives. You'd work primarily as an instructor and test pilot, but you'd be available for situations exactly like what happened today. That evening, Kate sat in her small quarters at Bagram, looking at the medical evaluation forms that Colonel Patterson had given her. Returning to flight status would mean comprehensive medical testing, psychological evaluation, and requalification on A-10 systems. It would also mean accepting responsibility for other people's lives again, the weight she'd spent 3 years trying to avoid. Her phone rang. It was one of the SEAL team members she'd saved. "Major Morrison? This is Senior Chief Peterson from Neptune 6. I wanted to thank you for what you did today." "You don't need to thank me, Senior Chief. That's what close air support is for." "Ma'am, I've been in special operations for 15 years. I've been saved by A-10s before, but I've never seen flying like what you did today. Coming in that low, with that level of precision, under that much fire, that was legendary." Kate was quiet for a moment. "Senior Chief, can I ask you something? When you were pinned down today, what was going through your mind?" "Honestly, I was thinking about my wife and kids, about whether I was going to make it home. And then I heard your voice on the radio, and I knew everything was going to be okay." "Why?" "Because you sounded like a pilot who knew exactly what she was doing and wasn't going to leave until the job was finished. That's the kind of pilot every ground soldier prays for." After hanging up, Kate picked up the medical evaluation forms and began filling them out. For 3 years, she'd told herself that her flying career was over, that her injuries made her unsuitable for the demands of combat aviation. But today had proven something different. Today had shown that while her back might have limitations, her skills, her judgment, and her commitment to bringing people home safely were as strong as ever. 2 months later, Major Kate Morrison walked into the 354th Fighter Squadron's briefing room wearing her flight suit for the first time in 3 years. The medical board had cleared her for limited flight operations, and she had successfully completed requalification training on A-10 systems. But more importantly, she was no longer running from her identity as a pilot. Her new role combined flight instruction with emergency response duties. She would train the next generation of A-10 pilots in advanced close air support techniques while remaining available for situations that required her unique combination of experience and skill. "Good morning," she began, addressing a room full of young A-10 pilots eager to learn advanced combat tactics. "I'm Major Morrison, and I'm going to teach you how to fly close air support missions that bring everyone home alive." One of the students raised his hand. "Major, is it true that you completed a combat mission while assigned to maintenance duty?" Kate smiled, thinking of SEAL Team 6, of the tanks she'd destroyed, and of the 3 years she'd spent hiding from who she really was.
What I did was remember that being a pilot isn't just a job, it's a commitment. A commitment to the people on the ground who are counting on you to deliver when everything else has failed. She walked to the whiteboard and wrote, A-10 Close Air Support, Precision Under Fire. Today, we're going to learn that effective close air support isn't about following standard procedures. It's about adapting to impossible situations and finding ways to complete the mission when the book says it can't be done. She turned back to the class. Who can tell me why A-10 pilots sometimes have to fly lower than recommended altitudes? A young lieutenant raised her hand. To achieve maximum accuracy? That's part of it, Kate said. But more importantly, we fly low because the people we're protecting deserve our very best effort, even if that means accepting additional risk to ourselves. Over the next year, Major Kate Morrison developed the most comprehensive close air support curriculum the Air Force had seen. Her students didn't just learn to fly A-10s, they learned to think like combat pilots who understood that their primary mission was bringing ground forces home safely regardless of the personal cost. But more than that, they learned from someone who had walked away from flying because the responsibility was too painful, and who had found her way back because that same responsibility was too important to abandon. The program's success was measured not just in training scores or qualification ratings, but in the real-world missions where Kate's students used their skills to save lives. When Captain Rodriguez, who had made a full recovery, successfully completed a complex close-air support mission using ultra-low altitude tactics, she credited Kate's training. When Lieutenant Davis extracted a trapped Marine unit by flying at altitudes that violated standard operating procedures, he sent Kate a photo of the Marines he'd saved. And when the Air Force asked Kate to export her close-air support training to Allied air forces, she knew she had found her true calling. "Kate," Colonel Patterson said one afternoon, "NATO wants to implement your low-altitude close-air support techniques across all Allied A-10 squadrons. Interested in going international?" Kate looked at the request documents. It would mean training not just American pilots, but Allied aviators who might one day provide close-air support for American ground forces in combat zones around the world. "Colonel, I'd like to tell you about someone who should be part of this program. Senior Chief Peterson from the SEAL team. He understands better than anyone what effective close-air support means to people on the ground."
You want a Navy SEAL helping to train Air Force pilots? I want someone who can explain to pilots why precision and courage matter when people's lives are on the line. Colonel Patterson smiled. You know, Kate, when you left flight status 3 years ago, I thought we were losing one of our best A-10 pilots. But what we really gained was someone who could teach others to be better than she ever was. That evening, Kate stood on the flight line at Bagram, watching her students conduct night close air support training. The scene was familiar. She had stood in similar spots during her 8 years as an active pilot. But tonight felt different. Tonight, she wasn't thinking about the missions she'd never fly again, or the back injury that had ended her career, or the 3 years she'd spent maintaining aircraft instead of flying them. Tonight, she was thinking about the young pilots she was training, about the close air support techniques that might one day save ground forces in combat, and about the knowledge that her experience, both the successes and the setbacks, was being used to make combat aviation more effective for everyone. Her phone buzzed with a text message from one of her students. "Major Morrison, just completed my first real close air support mission. Used your low-altitude techniques to extract an Army unit. Everyone made it home safely. Thank you for teaching us that sometimes you have to risk everything to save everyone." Kate smiled and typed back, "That's what A-10 pilots do. We get low, we get dirty, and we bring people home. Proud of you." 3 months after returning to flight status, Kate received an unexpected visit from General Patricia Hayes, commanding officer of Air Combat Command. The general's unannounced arrival at Bagram meant either exceptional recognition or serious concerns about Kate's unconventional return to flying. "Major Morrison," General Hayes said as she entered Kate's office, "I've come to discuss your close air support training program and your unique approach to combat aviation." Kate stood at attention. "General, if there are concerns about my methods—" "Sit down, Major. I'm not here about concerns." Hayes took the chair across from Kate's desk. "I'm here because your program has caught the attention of the Pentagon. We've had 7 separate incidents in the past 2 months where A-10 pilots used techniques they learned from your training to complete missions that were previously considered impossible." Kate listened as the general described the missions. Captain Williams had successfully eliminated enemy armor at altitudes below 100 feet using Kate's ultra-low attack techniques.
Major Thompson had extracted a special forces team by flying through a mountain valley that was supposedly too narrow for A-10 operations. Lieutenant Colonel Davis had completed a danger close fire mission that saved an entire Marine company using precision techniques that Kate had developed specifically for situations where ground forces were within 50 meters of target areas. Major, your training isn't just improving pilot performance. It's redefining what we consider possible in close air support operations. Thank you, General, but the real credit goes to the pilots who— Hayes held up a hand. Major, I didn't come here to give you credit. I came here to give you a choice. She opened a folder and slid it across the desk. The Air Force wants to establish a new specialized training command focused entirely on advanced close air support tactics. You would head the program and train instructor pilots from every A-10 squadron in the Air Force. Kate stared at the folder. General, that's every close air support pilot in the service. Exactly, which means your techniques would influence every ground support mission the Air Force flies. The question is, are you ready for that level of impact? Kate thought about SEAL Team 6, about the tanks she'd destroyed, about every pilot she'd trained who had successfully brought ground forces home safely. General, 3 years ago, I would have said that was too much responsibility for someone with my medical limitations. And now? Now I understand that the responsibility isn't about my physical limitations, it's about ensuring that every pilot has the skills and mindset to complete impossible missions when American lives depend on it. General Hayes smiled. That's exactly the answer I was hoping for. The establishment of the Advanced Close Air Support Training Command took 8 months to implement. Kate found herself working with pilots, engineers, and even special operations personnel to develop the most comprehensive combat aviation curriculum the Air Force had ever created. But the assignment that meant the most to her came when she was asked to train a new generation of female A-10 pilots who were breaking barriers in combat aviation. One morning, she was conducting an advanced tactics seminar when a young captain caught her attention. Captain Sarah Chen was handling complex close air support scenarios with exceptional situational awareness, making decisions that showed both technical skill and intuitive understanding of ground combat dynamics. After the exercise, Kate called Sarah aside. "Captain, that was outstanding work in the simulator. Where did you develop such strong instincts for ground support operations?" Sarah looked slightly uncomfortable. "Major, my brother is a Marine infantry officer. He's told me stories about close air support missions where the difference between life and death was measured in feet of altitude and seconds of timing." Kate felt a connection forming. "What kind of stories?" "He was in a unit that got extracted by an A-10 pilot who flew so low that the aircraft's landing gear almost touched the treetops. He said that pilot saved 12 Marines by being willing to do what everyone else said was impossible." Kate smiled. "Captain, would you be interested in advanced training that focuses on those kinds of impossible missions?" "I would be honored, Major." Over the following weeks, Kate worked closely with Sarah, teaching her not just the technical aspects of ultra-low altitude flying, but the philosophy behind it. The understanding that close air support wasn't just about destroying enemy targets, it was about becoming an extension of the ground forces you were protecting. "Major," Sarah said one afternoon after a particularly challenging training flight, "I'm starting to understand why my brother talks about A-10 pilots the way he does. This isn't just flying. It's combat partnership." "What do you mean?" "I mean that when we're providing close air support, we're not just pilots in the sky. We're part of the ground team. Their survival depends on our willingness to get close enough to the fight to make every shot count." Kate nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right. And that's exactly what separates effective close air support from just dropping bombs from altitude." 6 months later, Captain Sarah Chen was deployed to Syria as part of an A-10 squadron supporting Special Operations Forces. 2 weeks into her deployment, she faced her first real close air support emergency when a Delta Force team became pinned down in an urban environment with enemy forces occupying buildings on all sides. Using techniques she had learned from Kate's training, Sarah successfully eliminated enemy positions by flying between buildings at altitudes below 200 feet, delivering precision cannon fire that neutralized threats without causing civilian casualties in the dense urban environment. The after-action report praised Sarah's exceptional situational awareness and innovative use of ultra-low altitude tactics in complex urban terrain. When Kate received a copy of the report, she found a handwritten note attached. Major Morrison, I brought the Delta team home safely today using everything you taught me about getting close to the fight. I could hear my brother's voice reminding me that Marines were counting on precision and courage. Thank you for teaching me that being an A-10 pilot means never accepting impossible as an answer. Sarah. That evening, Kate called Dr. Martinez, the flight surgeon who had helped her process her return to flying.
Doctor, I wanted to share some news with you. One of my students successfully completed her first urban close air support mission today. That's wonderful, Kate. How does it feel to know that your training made the difference?
It feels like my back injury and the 3 years away from flying weren't a detour from my career. They were preparation for what I was really supposed to be doing, which is teaching other pilots that physical limitations, fear of failure, and institutional barriers are just obstacles to overcome, not reasons to quit. Every pilot I train, every technique I develop, every impossible mission that becomes possible, it's all proof that setbacks can become setups for greater impact. A year after the establishment of the Advanced Close Air Support Training Command, Kate was invited to speak at the International Close Air Support Symposium in London. The audience included pilots, ground commanders, defense contractors, and military strategists from over 30 countries. Ladies and gentlemen, Kate began. 4 years ago, I was maintaining A-10 aircraft because I had convinced myself that my flying career was over. A back injury had ended my flight status, and I thought that physical limitations meant I could no longer serve as a combat pilot. She looked out at the audience, which included many of the pilots she had trained. What I learned is that sometimes our greatest contributions come not from what we can do despite our limitations, but from what we can teach others because of what we've overcome. Kate clicked to her first slide, showing statistics about close air support effectiveness since the implementation of her training programs. Since establishing advanced close air support training, participating air forces have seen a 45% increase in successful ground support missions. More importantly, we've seen a 60% reduction in civilian casualties during urban operations because pilots now have the training and confidence to get close enough to their targets to ensure precision. She paused, letting the statistics resonate with the audience. But numbers don't tell the whole story. Behind every successful close air support mission is a pilot who understood that their aircraft isn't just a weapons platform, it's a lifeline for the people on the ground who are counting on them to deliver when everything else has failed. The presentation continued for 45 minutes, covering technical aspects of ultra-low altitude flying, urban close air support techniques, and the integration of air and ground operations. But the moment that resonated most with the audience came near the end. Last month, I received a letter from a Special Forces sergeant whose team had been extracted by an A-10 pilot trained in our program.
He wrote, Major Morrison, I don't know your student's name, but she flew lower than I thought was possible and put cannon rounds exactly where they needed to go to save my team. My children still have their father because someone taught her that getting close to the fight isn't just tactics, it's commitment. Kate's voice caught slightly as she continued. That letter reminded me that our responsibility as combat aviators doesn't end when we leave the cockpit. It extends through every person we train, every technique we develop, and every life we help save through the knowledge we pass on. The standing ovation lasted for 4 minutes. After the symposium, Kate was approached by Air Marshal James Peterson from the Royal Air Force, who commanded Britain's ground attack squadrons. Major Morrison, I have a proposition for you. The RAF is developing a new joint training program with the USAF, focused on close air support in contested urban environments. We need someone with your experience to lead the curriculum development. Kate looked at the proposal documents. Air Marshal, urban close air support is incredibly complex. The margin for error is essentially zero when you're flying between buildings with friendly forces and civilians in close proximity. Exactly why we need you. Your students are already proving that these missions can be completed safely and effectively. We want to expand that capability across all Allied ground attack aircraft. Kate thought about Sarah Chen, about all the pilots she trained, about the ground forces who were alive because someone taught their air support to get low and stay precise. Air Marshal, if I do this, I want to include ground commanders in the training program. Pilots need to understand what close air support looks like from the ground perspective. Absolutely. We want this to be truly joint training. And I want to include urban warfare specialists, civilian protection advocates, and even architects who can help pilots understand how to navigate city environments safely. Peterson smiled. Major, I think you're exactly what this program needs. 4 months later, Major Kate Morrison stood in front of the first joint NATO close air support training class at RAF Lakenheath. The audience included not just pilots, but ground commanders, urban warfare specialists, and civilian protection advocates from 12 different countries. Good morning, she began. I'm Major Morrison, and over the next 4 weeks, we're going to redefine what's possible in urban close air support operations. One of the students, a German Luftwaffe pilot, raised his hand. Major, how do we balance the need for precision with the safety margins required for low-altitude urban flying? Kate smiled, thinking of SEAL Team 6, of the buildings Sarah Chen had flown between, and of every ground force that had been saved by pilots willing to accept risk in order to deliver precision.
Captain, the answer is that safety margins aren't about staying far away from danger. They're about getting close enough to eliminate danger for the people you're protecting, while having the skills and judgment to do it safely. She walked to the whiteboard and wrote, Urban Close Air Support, Precision in Complex Environments. Today, we're going to learn that effective urban close air support requires more than just flying skills. It requires understanding architecture, civilian behavior patterns, urban combat dynamics, and the psychology of ground forces operating in complex terrain. As Kate looked at the faces of pilots from multiple countries, she saw echoes of her younger self and Sarah Chen, confident, skilled, ready to push the boundaries of what was considered possible in combat aviation. But now, she also saw something else, the wisdom that comes from overcoming setbacks, the understanding that limitations can become launching points for innovation, and the knowledge that the most effective combat pilots are those who understand that their mission extends far beyond their own aircraft. Today, we're going to start with the most important lesson I can teach you: how to fly close air support missions that bring everyone home alive, even when the mission parameters seem to make success impossible. She looked around the room one more time, thinking about the journey that had brought her from a crashed A-10 on a runway to a classroom where she was shaping the future of international combat aviation. Because that's what we do as close air support pilots. We don't just support ground forces, we become part of them. We don't just engage targets, we eliminate threats to the people we've sworn to protect. And we don't just complete missions, we ensure that every person counting on us gets to go home to their families. Major Kate Morrison had found her way back to combat aviation one more time. But this time, she was ensuring that pilots from around the world had the skills and mindset to turn impossible missions into successful rescues. The woman who had once been too injured to fly was now teaching others that physical limitations, institutional barriers, and tactical constraints were just challenges to overcome through innovation, training, and unwavering commitment to the people on the ground. And in that transformation, she had discovered that sometimes the most important flight you can make is the one that teaches others how to navigate their way through the impossible and bring everyone home safely.